Hello, I'm Dale from Rhinox and we're here today to talk to you about what to look out for when you buy a used mini excavator. So there's a few things you might want to look out for when you're buying a new piece of equipment. The first one is really the running costs and the maintenance you're going to face with a piece of equipment. The second one is brand reliability. The third one is the actual state of the machine. And if you're ever thinking about selling this piece of plant on in the future, there is a fourth consideration you might want to make, and that is what the residual value of your piece of equipment will be when you've finished with it. And that does vary from machine to machine. So when you're buying a new piece of equipment, and we're talking primarily here about a mini excavator, but it does really apply to any type of equipment that you purchase. There's a number of things you need to think about. This may be your first purchase, so it's a considerable investment. So the first thing you need to think about is your budget. Now, budget will vary on a number of factors: the age and state of the machine, the brand you're looking at investing in. But that's really the number one thing to think about, is what can you afford to invest in this piece of equipment. So having arrived at your budget for your machine, the next thing you need to think about is what make and model of machine you're going to be purchasing. Now, you may have a specific project in mind that you want your piece of equipment for, so that you may be governed around the size of piece of equipment that you need. And that will then lead into what make and model of machine you actually want to purchase. Now, there are a number of factors. There's some makes and models that have been around for a very long time, others that are newer entrants to the market. And all of these factors play into the actual value of the equipment that you're purchasing. So the next point to consider is brand reliability. That's how reliable the piece of equipment is, how often you'll have to make repairs to it. Now, obviously, the older a piece of equipment gets, the more likely you are to have to make repairs, but some machines do have better engineering in them and thereby will wear better than others. We're not here to specify any one particular make and model, but we would recommend that you perhaps talk to some more seasoned operators, plant companies, for example, and you'll get feedback from them as to which machines they feel are better and which are worse. The third consideration at this point is the ongoing running costs of the machine. So obviously repairs is one factor in that, but there is other things. So different makes will use different engines and thereby will have different fuel consumption, for example. And depending on the size of this machine, this can become a factor that you may want to consider. Obviously, bigger machines have bigger engines and thereby use more fuel, so it becomes a more important consideration. So having arrived at your budget and what machine you're looking to now purchase, you're now into the zone of actually researching specific pieces of equipment that you feel might benefit you or suit your requirements. So the first consideration is what age machine and the condition. So you need to go and inspect the machine. Now, the first point I would look at is you may see a machine advertised at a certain age and you want to verify that up front to make sure that's relevant. So every machine will have what's called a data plate on it. And this machine, this is a Kubota, and the data plate is down here underneath the cab. This is a very common position on a mini excavator. Sometimes it is inside the cab near to where the operator's feet would be. On bigger machines, it may be in various places, sometimes even inside the engine bay. But on that data plate, it's stamped with the actual year that this machine was manufactured. So much like cars, equipment is stamped with the year it's manufactured, and then generally that's also the year it's sold, because most manufacturers want to move that equipment into the market in that year, otherwise it starts to depreciate. The next point is hours on the clock. So like a car has a mileometer, pieces of equipment have an hour meter, and that is really just telling you how much work this piece of equipment has done. Now, you can get variations. Smaller machines that may have done 1,000 hours could be considered higher use, whereas a large piece of equipment may have done 3,000 hours and be considered low hours, because it does vary on the type of equipment and the type of work it's expected to do. So if you're unsure, I would recommend speaking to an experienced plant operator again to get some feedback on what they would deem as a reasonable hours machine. Typically, I would recommend going to someone independent of the person that's selling the equipment, so that you've got an independent piece of advice. So having established the age of your machine and the number of hours it's done, the next thing we would recommend checking is the actual condition of the oil. Now, to do that, we're going to go inside the engine bay on this machine and we're going to pull out the dipstick from the engine and check it. Now, what we're looking for here is oil that is more of a clear or milky colour. Now, this one is very black, so that would indicate that the engine hasn't been serviced very recently. And if there was a lot of residue in it, it would call into question whether there's some issues such as a leaking head gasket or something along those lines. So that's just one to be aware of. And so while we're by the engine bay, the next thing we'll check on oil again is just to unscrew the oil filler cap and just have a look in there as well, because if there's a lot of residue built up in there, again, it could indicate that the engine is quite worn or there's issues with the head gasket. Actually, on that point, this machine doesn't look too bad, so we're satisfied with that. So having checked the condition of the oil, the next point we would recommend then is to try starting the machine up. So be looking out for initially that the battery's charged, because that's your first problem. If the battery's flat, you're not going to be able to start it. But then when you jump in, normally it's a diesel engine, so you're waiting for the engine to warm up. So you'll have the glow plug indicator come on, wait for that to go off, and then see how the machine starts. If it's having to turn over a lot of times, you've obviously got some challenges there, and it's only going to cause you problems down the line. If it does start up, just check where the exhaust is coming out and make sure you're not getting too much black smoke, which could indicate that there's oil in the fuel mix as well. Having started the excavator, the next most important thing you need to check is the hydraulics, because without the hydraulics working, really you haven't got a machine. So what we'd recommend here is go through every single movement or control and extend it to its fullest extent. So for example, extend the boom out as far as you can go, crowd the bucket round fully both directions, lift your blade up and down. That's one that often gets missed, but make sure you check that if it's fitted with a blade, and then track the machine along. If it's got high-speed tracking, which enables it to go faster, then make sure you engage the high-speed tracking and travel both directions there to ensure that that's working as it should, because that's another area that does get missed sometimes. So while you're checking the hydraulics, the other thing you're looking out for is excessive wear in any of the joints. So for example, when you're crowding the bucket round, be noticing whether those pins are loose in their bushes, and really on all the joints that are on the machine, make sure that you're checking them, that there's not too much excessive wear as you're slewing the arm round, and indeed the whole excavator, you need to check that position as well. Make sure there's not too much movement. Another check that you might want to do at this point is, as you get into the machine, see if you can rock the excavator, because if there's play at that point, then that indicates that the slew ring is worn. Obviously that depends on the size of the machine. That's particularly relevant to maybe a mini, small mini excavator, because you're not going to do that on a larger machine. But as you're slewing round on a larger machine, you will find that as you sometimes get some extra movement after you've stopped slewing, that indicates wear in the slew ring. Another area that you want to check as you're inspecting your machine is the undercarriage, and by the undercarriage we mean the tracks. In this case it's a rubber tracked excavator, but on bigger machines it would be steel tracks, and all the sprockets, the idlers and the rollers that are on the undercarriage. You want to check the condition of the tracks and what state they're in, whether they're worn or whether they're still in good condition. On a rubber track, be sure to check on the inside of the track as well, so that to make sure there's no lugs that are about to pull out, and then check the idlers and the sprockets to make sure they're not too worn away, and the rollers the same. Then we would recommend putting your blade down, so this is the blade here, put that down on the ground and swing the machine round, and with your bucket lift the machine completely off the ground and just run the tracks backwards and forwards for a few seconds and see what you can hear, and get someone to check those rollers for you to make sure they're all turning like they should do. And the final point we would say when you're inspecting the machine really is the condition of the cab, and indeed the overall condition of the paintwork of the entire machine. So look out for things like, is the seat excessively worn? Are all the controls in good working order in the cab? Has it been well maintained and looked after? And then as you're going around the machine, looking at, are all the decals still on? Is the wiring looking intact? Are the hydraulics looking good around the arm? Just generally look at the overall condition of the machine, because these things all add value if you do come to sell it and make a machine hold its value. So a point we just wanted to speak about briefly was just about the arrangement on the bottom end of the dipper arm, particularly if the machine is fitted with a quick hitch, because as a bucket manufacturer, this is an issue we often face. People will buy a used piece of equipment that's fitted with a quick coupler, not realising that it's been fitted with what's called a mix-match quick hitch. Thereby, the hitch is fitted to the machine with the original dimensions of the machine, but is picking up different buckets. Then if they purchase the machine with maybe only one bucket, they come along and say they want some more buckets, and they order them as the buckets for a Kubota KX027, for example, only to discover when they receive them that they are not the correct fitment. Now, it's a hard thing for an individual to actually get that information themselves. What we would recommend in this instance is reach out to a bucket manufacturer, and Rhinox will be more than willing to assist you in this process to identify what the correct measurements should be for this machine, or indeed what you may have on it, so that you can be sure that when you come to get new attachments, we're there to help you with the correct items. So there you have it. That's our top tips for purchasing a used mini excavator. Don't forget that if you want more information about how to maintain your equipment, check out this video here, and don't forget to subscribe and like this video.